Hi, I'm Vic Bearcroft, and today we're going to do a nice pastel portrait of Tinker, a very handsome, if not a little bit naughty, cob, in a few simple colours in pastel on dark grey velour. To start with, as usual, I've just sketched the outline and a few details with a charcoal pencil, quite light. Because if we want to make some adjustments, if you use a charcoal pencil, it is light, and you can quite easily rub that almost away, but certainly you can paint over it. So once you're happy with the proportions and everything's in the right place, then we'll go on to do what I call the tonal sketch, which comes in two parts. First of all, you're getting a sort of fairly decent sketch of your subject, the horse in this case, and then adding some tone to create form. So let's begin with using a hard black pastel, slightly rounded corner on that, nothing too sharp at this stage, and then we'll work from the top down in this case. So let's begin with the ears. So just gently, don't press on too hard, because even at this stage, if you want to make some adjustments, it's easier to make those adjustments if your pastel isn't too hard, or your mark isn't too hard. So what we're after basically is a mid to dark grey sketch to begin with, and we can add more tones, more details later on. So think of it as just a fairly comprehensive, almost like a charcoal sketch, I guess. And the shape of the ears, the inner ear is this dark section here. Tone that in shortly. So, as usual, when we're painting animals with fur, what we look for in the longer fur is the length and direction. That gives us a kind of fur map. In this case, of course, it's Tink's mane and the fringe, I suppose. So the soft edge and the outer mane, and that's going to be growing upwards from the back of the neck, so we'll put a few little lines in there to indicate that direction and movement. And the longer part of the mane, I think in this photograph he's actually had a bit of a haircut. Normally it would be quite a lot longer than that, I think. So just few lines to show the length and direction of the mane, and the same with his fringe. A little bit finer hair on the fringe. So again, look for the length and direction. If you're painting long hair, try to go for the full length rather than break it up into little sections, where it can look a little bit bitty. And that's the outer part of his fringe, just on the edge of his nose. And we'll work down from the eye down to the nose. So we have this kind of bulbous bone shape here, rounded bone shape at the top of the eye socket. That's that little shape there. Going down into the corner of the eye. And then we'll have his eyelid, slightly sharper corner for this, so a little bit more detailed. So his upper eyelid here. And the eye itself, the eyeball, nicely rounded on the inside, and the lower rim. We'll do all the details in the eye later on, so don't worry about that at this stage. Lower rim, down into the nose. All these little shapes that we're sketching now indicate we have indentations, I beg your pardon. Indentations, bone structure and all of that sort of stuff. So we're just going to shade in gently indentation there, where the cheekbone is. So that'll be underneath the cheekbone. Cheekbone is raised, of course, so that'll be a little bit lighter. And of course the hair around his nose is going to be much shorter than the fringe or the mane, so we just leave the paper to get that velvet texture. We don't have to do individual tiny hairs around the face. and then the hair going into his neck. So note it's all quite loose at the moment, quite sketchy. Build the details up bit by bit, that's the best option I think. Details come later on. The important thing to think about first of all is the tones, basic shapes and the tonal values. That way you begin to get the rounded forms of your subject before anything else. The dark shadow under his chin. He's got quite a white muzzle, so we don't want to do a hard outline around anything that's white. If we do a hard black outline around a white muzzle, it's going to be harder, not impossible, but harder to get that lovely highlight on it later on. So we'll keep it fairly faint, gently, 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 get the shape of his lower lip. And the nostril here, darker centre of the nostril, and again gently around the nose going into the top lip, just a very, 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 very light grey outline, and the same on the bridge of the nose. And this is the darker bit of fur going up to the white fur, just a little soft furred edge to that. And that's our basic sketch, basic outline if you like. So next thing to do, once you've got that, you can rub that in, by the way. You can rub it in as you go along. That will fix the pastel into the paper. It will soften your marks a little bit as well, so if your marks are a little bit too harsh, keep them nice and soft, especially around the edges. So don't be afraid of giving it a good rub. You're not going to remove the pastel from the velour. Just going to make it a little bit lighter, a little bit softer. Now that's well and truly fixed into the fibres, not going anywhere. So, next step on this first stage is to add some tonal values. For that, I'm going to use the flat side of a black pastel, and what we want to create is a dark tone, a mid-tone and a light tone. If you think for now the grey paper, this lovely dark grey paper, is going to be your light tone, then we want to add a mid-tone and a dark tone to that. But what I always do is build up those tones at the same amount of pressure. So one light tone on top of another light tone equals a mid-tone. A light tone on top of that is the slightly darker tone. So all these layers are going to be the same amount of light pressure. It's always best to work from light to dark. If in doubt, don't go too dark too soon. Build up the layers nice and light. So inside of the ear, well, the ears generally are going to be quite dark. We have a sort of darkish brown overall fur. So first of all, a light layer for that, rub it in, working around the shadows underneath the fringe, nice light layer, rub it in, and so on. So we'll build in, apart from the highlights, the strong highlights, the white fur and so on, we'll give everything a coat of light grey tone. Notice, of course, on velour paper, anything you've sketched beforehand won't move, it won't disappear. So don't be afraid of rubbing it. And I always say, when you're doing this, even though you're using the flat of the pastel, always stroke the pastel in the direction of the fur, because if you catch any edges or anything like that, at least they're going in the right direction. Don't forget the eyeball as well. Eyeballs are always set back in the eye sockets. People have a tendency often to leave them blank. They do need quite a dark tone in the eyeballs to push them back. So there we have it. The nose itself, this part is going to be white. So I'm going to leave that, just put a little bit of shading under his top lip, down into the chin, and around the nostril, and the top lip. Now we just need to add, let's not forget that here, and a little bit of the fringe. Now we need a second tone, at least one more tone to get the darker values for the inside of the ear, for example. So inside of the ear, it's a lot darker. We can always add more tone later on, so don't worry if it's not dark enough at this stage. Or once you've added some colour, if you wanted to make it darker, we can make it darker later on top of the colour. So remember, this is just a tonal sketch. A sketch with some tonal values. Slightly darker main on that side. And darker underneath the line of the main coming down over the cheek, casting a shadow there. And shadows around the bottom of the cheek. This helps to create that round form in that big muscle there, as you can see. So the tonal values create form, rounded forms. Darker shadow alongside his neck, fading out there. The eye again, the eye area is going to be quite dark. And more of a shadow underneath his fringe there. And again underneath the cheekbone. You see how tonal values start to create anatomical form. And a little bit darker down the centre of his fringe. A bit lighter on the top where the light's catching it. And just a touch more around his nostril and under the top lip. There we have our three tones, dark, grey, mid-grey, and the dark grey paper is now, of course, our light grey. So once we've got that, remember details come later on, then we need to add some base colours. Two base colours for this. What we have is kind of golden brown, this one that's actually dark orange, orange with black added to it. And the other one is this burnt umber. It's a nice cool brown, which is pretty much the colour of Tink's dark brown fur, with some kind of warm highlights. So let's begin with the warmish highlights, and I can see on our reference we have some warm highlights on the top of the mane, upper part of the mane going down here. Again, using the flat of the pastel. Don't worry about being too precise with this, just lay the colour down in the general area that you see it. Okay. Light layers again. And rub it in. Remember, if you want to add more colour, you can always add more colour. And then around his cheek, that's a kind of warmer section. So we're looking for warm areas. Maybe where the light's catching that brown fur and just warming it up a little bit. And around here, use this warm brown around the muzzle as well. So around the nostril, top lip, bottom lip, just coming into the chin. And lower part of the fringe. And then around the eye. So above and below the eye we have this warm brown, and the eyeball itself, well, we can cover that at the same time. Remember, we can go over that with highlights and details later on. When you're adding base colours, just think of it as an area to add the colour. It's an area, it's not an eye, it's just an area of that colour. It's a second foundation. After your tonal sketch, which is the first foundation, the colour is the second foundation. So, the second colour is going to be our burnt umber, the cool brown. It's a kind of greyish brown. Now, we may want to add some more grey on top of this here and there, but overall, we're going to give it a sort of very light dusting of this greyish, or the cool brown, I should say. So feed that into the warm browns as well. Don't worry about all your tones disappearing at this stage. They will naturally get muted when you add colour over the top. 2 or 3 layers of colour will mute your tones and your sketch, but we'll bring those back. So just look for areas where you've got a little bit of coolness. So when you paint this burnt umber over the grey, it actually makes it look even cooler. When you paint a little bit over that warm dark orange, and it warms it up a little bit. So those two colours together give almost a perfect warm burnt umber as opposed to the cool burnt umber. So you can see the difference. Greyish brown there, a lot warmer there. Around the eyes again, especially the shadow parts. Umber is a shadow colour anyway. Eyeball will go over that a little bit. Also the Latin or Italian umbra, meaning shade. Lower part of his fringe. And a little bit more shadow under his top lip and around the nostril. So those are our base colours. So as you can see, the details from the sketch have virtually disappeared. That's why it's a bit of a waste of time trying to do too much detail too soon. Rather than do that, what we'll do is keep it quite loose at this stage, and then the next stage we can start to tighten things up a little bit, refine things even more. So back to our black pastel, starting with the ears again. So if we just refine the edge of the ears a little bit, I want to keep them fairly soft. The hair on the ears is not that long. We'll just darken the shadow on the inner part of the ear a little bit. Just a little bit more refined this time. I'm still using a rounded corner, but it's probably a little bit sharper than the corner I used to start with. Sharp corners are great for doing fine whiskers and things like that. But if you want an overall softness in your painting, then use a slightly rounded corner. So we've got the edge of the ear there, the inner part of the ear again is darker, going down to the head. A little bit of a soft furry edge to that, and don't forget each little section you put on, give it a rub just to soften it and push the pastel into the paper. So a little bit of texture around the back of the ear, coming forward, and again slightly more texture, slightly sharper texture in the mane, upper part of the mane first. You can see already that base colour we just put on, the burnt umber, is fading back. It's not going to be anywhere near as powerful. It serves as a foundation. So you can see that underlying colour beneath the finer details you're painting on top of that. And again we want some texture in the mane, hanging down here. Try and find, let's turn it around, yes, we have a slightly sharper corner there, we can use that, that's better. So we get the length, direction, overall flow of the mane by putting the shadows in, like shadows between different clumps of hair or different clumps of fur. That's what gets you your fur. So what's left at either side of these shadows is the overall clumps of hair, clumps of mane, the colour associated with it. So the base of the ear, the fur is going to be shorter, coming down into the head. So the base of the ear is about here. Fur just attaches itself to the upper part of the head around the eye. And we'll work down along the edge of this little bit of mane here, coming down into the neck. And there's the side of the cheek, so again using fur shadows to help create that shape. And the darker part of the neck in shadow is this lower part here. You can do as much detail as you want, of course, you know. We only have time in these sessions to do a certain amount of detail in the fur, otherwise we'd be here for hours and hours. But if you want to, if you like doing lots of detail, then just keep repeating these layers over and over again, slightly more refined each time, and you'll get a lot more detail, a lot more fur. So again, working from the shadow, lower part of the cheek, and we'll just sketch a few little shadow texture strokes in around the cheek, not too many. The more of these shadows you put in overlapping, like at the bottom here, lower part of the cheek, the darker it gets. So if we did too much in the middle section, then we make that too dark. We want it to be quite highlighted. So just odd one or two here and there, just to show we've got texture. That's all we want. So overlapping, adding more, creates a stronger shadow, a stronger form. So go around, down towards the chin. And very short fur. Remember, overlapping strokes gives you that shadow. And a few little tiny texture strokes in and amongst your base colour, which again helps to break up the base colour a little bit. And the darker edge of the fur before it gets to the white fur. And again, these shadows we've got here, so underneath the cheekbone. So we can do them reasonably flat, but at the same time we still want to adhere to the idea of length and direction of fur. So we'll still get a little bit of visible texture, but not as much. So it's reasonably flat. It gives us that nice shadow underneath the cheekbone. The lower part of the eye socket. The soft shadows around here. Don't try to avoid putting highlights on too early. If you put highlights on now, or even before now with your white pastel for example, that will contaminate the colour very early on. Always leave your highlights till the end. It's much more rewarding anyway to see those lovely highlights. Bring the whole thing together at the end. So try to resist. A little bit stronger shadow down here. So what we'll do is keep leaning back and squinting, check the tones. That's a great way of checking your tones. Lean back and squint. Blur out the detail. Just check tonal values. So we've got a nicely rounded cheek there, nice dark shadow in the neck. We'll come back up to the eye last of all, I think. Let's put some finer texture in the fringe, leaving a little bit of a highlight at the top when the light's catching it. So you can see the more texture you put on, the more it'll disguise the underlying colour. So don't be afraid of adding quite a bit of colour at your base colour stage, because it will soon get quite muted, quite subdued. And slightly darker bit of fringe on the right hand side. A couple of stray hairs that we can put in. The wind's blowing it perhaps. It's always a nice touch if you can do that. Makes it look much more natural. So the nostril, the dark part of the nostril is here. A little bit of shading around the inner part, just around that hole. And the line of the lip, top lip, tiny bit more shadow underneath. Going on to the lower lip and the chin. And you can put some knobbly texture in around the lips as well. They do have quite knobbly textures generally around the lips. Okay, so what we'll do next, just add a little bit more tone in there. In fact, I'll add a little bit more colour just to show you. If that's too warm or I think it's too light, I can take that burnt umber, I can put a bit more colour over the top of that. And so you can repeat these layers. Texture, colour, and so on. This just makes it a little bit darker, colour-wise, and same down underneath the neck. So you can keep alternating these layers bit by bit until you're happy with the amount of colour you've got and the amount of detail you've got. That should do us, I think. So now we'll do the eye area. First of all, above and below the eye, I want a fairly strong shadow. Again, I'm going to use the side of the black pastel first. Get a shadow underneath the fringe to help create that bone structure underneath the eye socket, which is that sort of shape. So it's highlighted there, shadowed on either side. So build that shadow up. Going up to the ear. And again, shadow on the other side, going up to the base of the ear. So the lighter section underneath. Lower part underneath the rim. Again, stronger shadow inside of the eye coming up to the fringe. Quite flat. Very short fur texture around here. That should do us. So the eye itself, we can deal with that now. What I want to do first of all is redo the upper eyelid. That's the eyelash line there. The eyelid itself is between those two lines. Nicely rounded. Corner of the eye, a little bit of shading there. And then we'll get the shape of the eyeball back. Rounded there, rounded here. And the lower rim. Coming down into the tear duct in the corner. And the thing to remember, whenever you're painting horses, if you're not familiar with horses, is the shape of the pupil. Horses' pupils are basically horizontal. They're not round, they're not vertical, they're horizontal. You can't always see that in a reference, but if I put it in about here, it will give you an idea. You might not see that on the photograph, but that's the kind of idea of the shape of a horse's pupil. A lot of grazing animals will have that horizontal shaped pupil, which helps see what's going on around them. Maybe if they're out, zebras for example, out in the plains of Africa, they want to see if some lions are approaching. So horizontal pupils help them to see almost 360 degrees. A little bit more shading around the fringe, I think. And I'm just going to add a little bit of colour into there, so a bit more colour. I'm going to use the burnt umber as a base colour for his eyeball, which is that. And I think I'll strengthen the colour a little bit underneath the cheek too. We want the eye really to be the strongest part of the whole painting. So let's finish the eye off. We'll have a little bit of back to the, or starting to use the hard white pastel now. A little bit of a soft highlight on the eyelid, a little bit on the lower rim. We have the white of the eye on the left there. And a little bit in the corner there, we have a shine on the tear duct in that corner. And then we can put the reflection in. So the reflection, just on the left there, just dab it with the corner of the hard white pastel so it's nice and soft. So keep dabbing it until you get the right amount of strength. And anything we need to finish off around that, we can go back to the black. For example, we have a shadow on in the corner of the eye, with the fringes overlaying that. tidying up afterwards with your sharp corner of the black pastel. Once you've got all those highlights in. Just to add a little bit more visibility. Sharp corner, get as much detail in as you want. Remember the pupil, so a little bit stronger perhaps. Lean back and squint. Tiny bit more shadow here. Keep adjusting your tones all the way through, by the way. Don't just accept the first tones that you get, because tonal values will change. The more you add colour, the more you add detail and tones, the more it changes. So it's a constantly changing aspect, the tonal values. So just keep adjusting them as you go through. So that's not too far off, I think. Our final tone, a little bit more grey down here. That's basically our eye done. There's a few finishing dark tones around the cheek and the neck. So that, and then we're ready for our final highlights. So final highlights in white. First of all, we'll deal with some soft highlights, so want some maybe grey highlights on the back of the ears or the tips of the ears, very gently with a rounded part of the pastel. Put the soft, what I call secondary highlights in. These are usually highlights in the fur and things like that. So top of the neck, just going into the opposite part of the mane. Soft highlights in there, little soft highlight on the top of the neck. And gentle highlights, because we want here, on this part of the mane, we want those highlights to be pale brown, not white. So if we use a rounding corner of the pastel very gently, what we'll get is very pale highlights. So it's the importance of having that underlying colour and any kind of shine that we get on the fur. And gently with your white pastel, use the underlying tone and colour, that will give you those sort of soft, shiny highlights on the fur itself. A few around the cheek, especially the highlighted parts, the middle section. Not so many in the shadows, of course. And we have these highlights on underlying bone structure, muscles and so on. The highlights come forward, so again they help to create the underlying form. Highlights around the eyes on that brown that we put under there gives us a nice pale brown. So you don't need many colours, but what you need to do is use the colours in your tones wisely, and then of course if you have black and white you can make one colour brown at the burnt under into many different shades of burnt umber. Some nice soft highlights all around there. Down towards the muzzle. Always be gentle. You can always add more highlights as well as anything else. You can always add more tone, more highlights, more colour. So always do nice gentle layers. Don't forget to rub them in. Do some soft highlights on his fringe. And the light's catching those strands of hair. So next what we'll do is the final primary highlights. Before we get on to our final primary highlights, always a good idea to have a quick check round, make sure all the necessary darks are dark enough. This final section, final stage, is all about tonal contrast. So not just to do with your final primary highlights, but also to do with your final dark tones, any bits of detail you want to bring forward that have maybe got a little bit subdued because your hand's wandering on the paper and so on. Just bring those back at this stage, and they'll be nice and fresh at the end. So pay particular attention to the eyes, of course. A little bit more shading around the base of the ear. Anything you want to just bring out. What I usually recommend is working from ears, eyes, nose, mouth. Those are the primary areas of focus, I think, in any portrait. Make sure they're all pretty much on the same level in terms of tone and detail. Let's strengthen that jawline a little bit more right at the end. Remember, this is your final stage, so these darks and final highlights are going to be a lot purer. If I carried on, or if you wanted to carry on and put more detail in on top of this, then you probably will need to go back and just touch up your final darks and highlights. A little bit stronger around the neck, lean back and squint, a little bit stronger on the lip line, and probably the nostril too. Again, just check around the eye. The eye is probably the most important bit. Get a nice shadow underneath the fringe. That should do us. So, our final darks are there. Now the final primary highlights are the ones, they're going to be the purest white, I suppose, or the strongest white. So let's begin around the eyes. So again, I'm just going to check. Now we're not doing any more to it. Get the white of the iris sclera, a tiny bit more shine, I think, on that reflection. That's it. Tiny bit more shine in the corner of the eye where the tear duct is. So all these are going to stay nice and pure now. Not going to do anything more on top of that. And then we'll go for the nose. So we have a bit of a grey shadow on that side of the nose, and we've got the grey paper, we can use that. So what we want to do is concentrate on just the soft whites. If you do a soft white over that, it'll give us a nice sort of pale grey. And then slightly stronger where the light's catching it. We'll bring that down. We've got a little bit of a furry edge on here. Now you can press on a little bit more with this, especially if you're confident with it. If not, do it in 2 or 3 light layers. But don't be afraid to press on a little bit more where you've got a strong highlight. So quite a solid highlight there. You can use either the corner, especially if you're doing whiskers and things like that, a sharp corner, or you can use the sort of 1/4 inch ledge, as I'm doing here, for a flatter, softer highlight. Give that little rub, and go around the nostril, and of course what the highlights do is they help you to do final shaping. A few little hairs inside the nose there. Any final shaping is always done at this stage with your final highlight, and it's kind of a magical transformation. Another reason not to put your highlights in too soon, because you'll lose that touch of magic at the end. So nice soft highlights around his top lip. A few little dimples if you want to put those in. And around the bottom lip and chin. Get a few dimples there. Quite a strong light catching the edge of that white fur. That's going to give us our shaping now on the lower lip and chin, as you can see. Nice and strong. So a little rub to soften it off. And feed that back into the bone of the chin there. And then I want to imagine the light striking the edge of his face there and the edge of his fringe and so on. So what I'm going to do is just add, even though they're not on the reference, you can add a couple of stronger highlights just along the right hand side of his fringe, with a sharper corner, and then get the actual shape of his nose. What a good old strong nose he's got there. Bring that around. That's going to feed down into his top lip. And what I want to do is just, once I've got that shape of his nose, just bring it back a little bit so it's not two-dimensional. The trouble is, if you get just a line around a rounded object, it loses the sense of three dimensions. So just bring that back in a little bit. Sharp corner again, we can add a few little chin whiskers and things like that. The light's catching them. Add a touch more character. Lean back and squint, and I think happy with that. We'll call that finished. I'll sign it on this side so it's not under his nose for a change. Usually sign on the right, but there we are. So there we are, Tink in 4 pastel colours on dark grey paper. Hope you've enjoyed this. Details of the workshop kit available for this will come up on the screen now, as are details of the Facebook page. If you do have a go with this at home, please do post your results on my Facebook page so we can see what you've been up to. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you for another tutorial next time.